315 and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium. 315 and 314, there is at least one person that's been shot, but they're saying there's hundreds of people just running around. Now, all of our units respond to the theater. Somebody's still shooting inside theater number 9 for an employee.
Lincoln 25, give me cops on the back side of it also. Yeah, I got people staying in theater 9 still.
Yeah, all of our RPs are saying theater 9 where Batman was playing.
316, somebody's spraying gas in here too.
Copy, somebody's spraying gas.
316, I need to rescue in here hot, so I got a guy shot.
Need more officers inside theater 9.
Get us some damn gas masks for theater 9, we can't get in it. 6 a.m., I need a march corps behind the theater table side. Got a suspect in a gas mask.
Suspect in a gas mask.
16, I got 7 down in theater 9. 7 down.
Copy, we'll notify fire. 7 down in theater 9.
321, one of the shooters might be wearing a white and blue plaid shirt.
Copy, outstanding shooter possibly wearing a white and blue plaid shirt.
On July 20th, 2012, in Aurora, Colorado, just miles away from where the Columbine shootings took place in 1999, 70 people were shot or wounded in the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Police arrived on the scene within 2 minutes of receiving the first 911 call and discovered a chaotic and horrific crime scene where 10 victims died on location and 2 later died at local hospitals. The youngest victim of the shooting was just 3 months old, and the youngest deceased, Veronica Moser Sullivan, was merely 6 years old. As the world watched emerging news reports and witnesses gave their testimonies as to what happened, fear and shock began to spread like wildfire across the nations as new details on the crime began to emerge and became public. Many people began to notice discrepancies on the information being released by the media, and just as many tragic instances in the past, details and facts were simply not adding up, and several questions remained unanswered and seemingly ignored by those reporting on the act of violence. Let's take an investigative look into the occurrences of that fateful night in Colorado to try and answer some of those questions that are not being reported by the mainstream media. Although as of today's date, August 10th, the case is still under investigation, it is important to look into what happened and provide some sort of explanation to try and answer some of the many questions the public are still wondering about, and present several facts that are not being looked at by the media and will likely not be brought up during the court proceedings of this case. Let us begin our journey into the rabbit hole.
We don't know. We have ideas. From what we saw, he wasn't alone. He had someone with him because the second can of tear gas didn't come from his side. He was completely dressed in black, head to toe. From what we saw, it seemed like he had something over his face, probably to prevent him from breathing it in. And we can only assume that someone got him in because he was hit. Whatever he was wearing seemed thick. So I don't think he would really. I think he'd stand out in the crowd.
We still didn't know what was going on. I asked the cop what was happening, and he said that there was still someone that wasn't detained. And at that point in time, I had feared for my own life. Before that, I was worried. I wanted to help everyone else. I wanted to be there for everyone else. But at that point in time, I wanted to get out of there. I feared for my own life. As I see people go out, I hear screaming, and it's not just the normal, it's a fire, possible fire situation at all. So then we decided to get up. We go out, we see the cop with his gun across his chest. We go out, and the first thing we see is a 13, 14-year-old girl with a bullet wound in her leg, in her stomach, and probably her chest. And I think she was right there about to die. And I want to help her, and then I look over, and there's a group of about 300 people running away from the theater. And at this point in time, we know that we need to get out of there. So I look at her, and we just leave. And we have to get out of there, and we go to our car. Somehow we were able to get to our car and leave the parking lot.
16 Adam, I need a march car behind the theater, stable side. Got a suspect in a gas mask.
09, okay, and we need cars south side. Suspect in a gas mask.
11, hold the air 1 second. Cars with that white car in the rear of the lot. Is that a suspect? Yes, we got rifles, gas masks. He's detained right now. I've got an open door going into the theater. Okay, hold that position. Hold your suspect. Great, Cruiser 49. All cars coming in, set up a perimeter around the entire mall. Set up a perimeter around the entire mall. All cars do not need to go into the movie theater.
Copy of units responding in. Just set up the perimeter around the entire mall.
321, one of the shooters might be wearing a white and blue plaid shirt.
Copy, outstanding. Shooter possibly wearing a white and blue plaid shirt.
Let me go back quickly to Corbin Dates. Was there one or two people involved in this? I've heard that you believe there might have been two, not just one.
I couldn't speculate, but the way from what I saw prior, before the gunman walking in, acted out, it seemed like there was two. But I couldn't speculate because I did not know what happened after that door had shut before it swung back open.
I think you told one of our producers that the person you saw going out of the theater to get and come back, whoever came back in, the one who went out had a goatee.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's correct, yeah. Prior to the movie even starting, when I came and got my seat at the theater, a guy walked in into the auditorium after me, sat into the very first right row, and got a phone call, took his phone call towards the emergency exit, not the lobby, and had his foot propped open by the door. It seemed like he was making gestures of trying to find somebody or trying to have somebody come to his location to where he currently was. After that, I had already stepped out of the auditorium to bring my friend in, and when we came back, the movie was just starting, lights were dimming, and that door had been closed.
And you testified to all this in court?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Corbin Dates, I'm glad you got through it.
So like 5 minutes after the guy comes running in and tells them that they're shooting outside, you hear the alarm go off. It said murder in the theater. Like, it's just going off. Murder in the theater. Murder in the theater. It's crazy that they got an alarm saying that there was a murder in the theater, you know? Nobody knows who there was. But they had shotguns.
Now that we have listened to several testimonies stating that there was more than one suspect, we should consider the evidence that can prove the fact that there was more than one person involved in the Aurora shooting. Just as when a convenience store or grocery store gets robbed, and we are shown the video surveillance of the crime, we can be sure that there were several video cameras at the Century 16 theater as well. This video evidence should display the suspect or suspects entering the theater as well as the crimes committed. There are always several cameras inside and outside at a movie theater. However, this evidence has not yet been discussed and likely will not be used during the trial, although it could prove to be one of the most important pieces of evidence and answer several questions that have gone unanswered. When asked about this evidence and how James or the suspects entered the theater, authorities have simply ignored the question or stated that they do not have that information. Here's the proof.
With that, I will take a modest number of questions. We are not speculating on motive.
Chief, can you walk us through the timeline of this? When it inside the theater?
Okay, let's do one at a time.
How did he get inside the theater?
That is under investigation. I will tell you that his car was parked right outside the back door. That's not something we would discuss in this setting. One more question. Yes, sir.
We had a witness tell us that he saw a suspicious person in the front aisle that was lingering near the exit where the shooter came in. And I'm wondering if you looked into that, because you said you believe he acted alone. So is that something you don't think played a part in allowing him to get in?
We have information as to what occurred in the theater based on the roughly 200 interviews that we have made, and we have ballistic evidence inside that suggests how the shooting went down, but we have so much investigation to do, and that's the kind of evidence for a prosecution, not for a discussion at this time.
Are there cameras in those evaluation of the shooter?
That door, you couldn't access that door from the outside. It has to be open from the inside.
We're not prepared to discuss any theories about how he got in there with the weapons, but we will tell you that his car was parked right outside the back door.
Are there cameras in those theaters? How long did the entire thing last? If you got 911 calls starting at 12:39.
We know there are a lot of rounds fired very rapidly. We know we were there within about a minute and a half to 2 minutes from when we were called. Now, in an event like that, you know, we can surmise how much time it takes for someone in that traumatic event to call 911 and get through and dispatch to us. That will all be looked into. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, folks.
This video has several curious aspects to it that are worth taking a look at in greater detail. Not only is the question about the security cameras avoided not once, but twice during the questioning, but the reactions of the FBI agent standing behind Aurora Police Chief Dan Oates is also worth taking another look at. It is quite obvious that they're avoiding the most important questions being asked.
And that's the kind of evidence for a prosecution, not for a discussion at this time.
Are there cameras in those evaluation of the shooter?
That door, you couldn't access that door from the outside. It has to be open from the inside.
We're not prepared to discuss any theories about how he got in there with the weapons, but we will tell you that his car was parked right outside the back door.
Are there cameras in those theaters? How long did the entire thing last? If you got 911 calls.
We're going to look at this debate from two angles. Tonight, part one, the questions the national media aren't asking. I don't need to go into a lot of details on the shooting because most every American is familiar with the basics. Police say 24-year-old James Holmes went into that theater in Aurora, Colorado. He was dressed in black, wearing a tactical helmet, vest, and leggings, as well as throat and groin protectors. Police say Holmes used an AR-15 assault rifle, a Remington shotgun, and a .40 caliber Glock handgun during that attack. And police say they found a second .40 caliber Glock inside of his car. The question being asked, how could he be allowed to buy those guns legally in Colorado? The question not being asked, how does an unemployed graduate student afford to buy them? Look, a decent AR-15 rifle costs $1,000 or more all by itself. The shotgun and the two handguns would easily run another $1,000 total. Spare mags, sights, slings, and so on, you're going to run another $1,000 across those three firearms. The bulletproof vest, that's easily another $800. And then you have all the money spent on bomb-making materials. Which brings us to our next question. As you know, police say that Holmes rigged his apartment with an incredibly complicated maze of fire bombs. But on the day he was arrested, he immediately told police about the bombs. Why? So our second question, where did this graduate student in neuroscience learn how to make a series of bombs so complicated that the FBI took 2 days to figure out how to disarm them? One official said the intricacy of these bombs is something rarely seen outside of war zones. He had a tripwire set behind the door to kill anyone who opened it. And yet, after setting this intricate death trap, decides to warn police about it before someone's killed? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Neither does what police are saying about this being a lone wolf attack.
All the evidence we have, every single indicator is that this is all Mr. Holmes' activity and that he wasn't particularly aided by anyone else.
But is that true? Eyewitness reports from the scene indicate that Holmes got a phone call from someone inside the theater, and also that tear gas was thrown from more than one location.
He got a phone call, and most people, when they get phone calls in theaters, they go straight out into the lobby to answer it. This person went directly to the emergency exit. He had his foot propped open by the door, and from the crack, it looked like he was signaling somebody or looking for somebody to come his way.
As I was sitting down to get my seat, I noticed that a person came up to the front row, to the front right, sat down, and as credits were going, I know it seemed like he got a phone call. So he went out towards the emergency exit doorway, which I thought was unusual to take a phone call.
So what you need to know is that there are so many questions about what really happened in Colorado. Questions we don't have answers to, and we may never have answers to. What is unfortunate is that instead of really digging into why this apartment would be rigged to kill, but then Holmes would then warn police and then lawyer up and not say anything else, where he got the funding and the firearms training, and these eyewitness reports that there was more than one person, instead of asking those questions, national media want to focus all their attention on why guns were legal in the first place. National media seems too busy playing the political game, not busy enough looking into what really happened. And that is Reality Check.
Police reported that they found all weapons used in the shooting on Holmes' person and in his car. The official count is 4 guns, which included an AR-15 assault rifle, Remington 870 shotgun, and 2 .40 caliber Glocks, one of which was found in his car. However, if we take another listen to the police audio, it seems officers found other guns inside the theater. There is also further evidence that there may have been another person or persons involved in the attack.
I'm going to be out on foot on the stable side of the theaters.
Cruiser 25, okay, and last unit reference to semi-automatic, tried again, you didn't come across.
16, I got people saying Theater 9 still.
Yeah, all of our RPs are saying Theater 9 where Batman was playing.
I'm not sure if that's where Batman was playing.
So they're saying it happened Theater 9 where Batman was playing, but another RP is saying they're still shooting.
16 Adam, I need a march corps behind the theater, stable side. Got a suspect in a gas mask. So 9.
Sure 9, okay, and we need cars south side. Suspect in a gas mask.
Have they doing the white Tiger by? 26 will have rescue on the north side of the 453, I have 3 parties shot over here. Okay, where's the rest going to be? Just on the north side. I've got 2 victims up here with me right now. One is shot in the face. 11, hold the air 1 second. Cars with that white car in the rear of the lot. Is that a suspect? Yes, we've got rifles, gas masks. He's detained right now. I've got an open door going into the theater. Suspect saying he's the only one, but I'm getting conflicting suspect description from the witnesses out here. Cruiser 11.
11.
I'm doing a Kennedy. I need somebody to shut this movie off at 9. Have me shut the movie off at 9. Alright, I'll work on it. Weekend 25 to everybody on this. It's an assault rifle. We have magazines down inside, so everybody watch out for the assault rifle. We need rescue or we need more patrol cars. Back to the seaside. We're just going to take these people. Expedition, get down here.
Denver.
Rifle. Going to be 5.56 caliber. Sorry.
Officer, do you need rescue as well?
No.
The one-shooter theory loses even more credibility when a second gas mask is discovered. How is it possible that 12 people were killed and 58 were injured by a semi-automatic weapon that jammed?
He shot easily like 60 or 70 rounds.
Then there's the official story given by the president himself concerning the blood path behind the theater. Obama claims that this wound spilled what appears to be buckets of blood. In the aftermath, the vulture media swoops in, misquoting Holmes' mother regarding the shooting, causing her to issue this statement.
I did not know anything about a shooting in Aurora at that time. He asked if I was Arlene Holmes and if my son was James Holmes, who lives in Aurora, Colorado. I answered, yes, you have the right person.
In an era of Facebook and Twitter, there's virtually nothing posted by or about James Holmes online. He is largely a man of mystery, but it's also very clear over the last few months, as his life was in crisis, he began to make plans for his attack. He moved to Colorado last fall and came across as a quiet and easygoing college student. But it was a different Jim Holmes who showed up at this San Diego pawn shop over the last few months, asking for tips about firing a gun.
I immediately recognized him when I saw his picture. My first words out of my mouth was, "Oh my God, he looks very familiar."
Last night, neighbors at his Aurora apartment building heard loud techno music blaring around midnight from his room, with the recorded sounds of gunshots.
Knowing that I almost opened the door to his apartment and then I was banging on that door, and thank God that he wasn't there.
And then Holmes apparently attempted to make himself into the Joker character of the Batman series, according to a briefing given to the New York police commissioner.
He had his hair painted red. He said he was the Joker.
It was over the last few months that Holmes, who was Phi Beta Kappa in college, saw his academic and career dreams collapse as he began to withdraw from a PhD program in neuroscience at the University of Colorado. This was Holmes just 6 years ago, called Jimmy, a clean-cut, 5'11" high school senior in San Diego. He had been a member of the junior varsity soccer team.
He was just quiet. He was just quiet.
When Holmes' mother, a psychiatric nurse, was first contacted at her San Diego home this morning, she did not seem surprised that something had happened. "You've got the right person," she told ABC News. "I've got to call the police." Today, his father, Robert, left the family home in San Diego under police protection to fly to Denver. In Colorado, police continue to search Holmes' apartment, which was described as elaborately booby-trapped with chemicals and incendiary devices. And authorities fear tonight he may have rigged similar booby traps in the university buildings where he took his classes. And Diane, late tonight we got word from our Denver affiliate that Holmes told police he was so calm because he had taken doses of the painkiller Vicodin.
A very strong painkiller.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
People who knew him in elementary school, where he grew up in Northern California, and we've gone back that far, Wolf, because the picture we've gotten of Holmes so far has been pretty slim. His former classmates telling CNN this guy was hardly the loner everybody's describing now in Colorado, but they do admit he was one of the smartest kids in the class.
He excelled in academics. He was top of the class, and even back then he was ahead of every student academically, and his intelligence, you could tell it was ahead of every student at that time. He was pretty normal. He wasn't a loner, as like I've heard him depicted later, but I mean, yeah, he was always with the kids. He got along well with everybody.
Wolf, I can imagine anybody along the line who knew James Holmes or interacted with him is probably having that same doubt in their mind. Is there anything they saw, anything they could have done along the way that could have sparked them to call authorities? Wolf?
The picture I see emerging, correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, because you've been doing some major investigating in all of this, that he may have been relatively normal, pretty normal, at least until he arrived in Colorado. Is that what you're learning?
It seems to be, and it seems to be centered around this elite neuroscience program he was involved with, which is why it's been frustrating for me and for many reporters to get such little information out of the University of Colorado's medical school to see exactly how he was behaving, though a source with information related to his academic career there, Wolf, is confirming to CNN that he did score poorly on that oral exam on June 7th. That was just 3 days before he told the school he was withdrawing. But again, the information has been pretty slim. What we've been trying to do, though, is just try to get a composite picture of James Holmes and try to pinpoint exactly where it was that, you know, it's not a scientific term, but where he may have snapped. And I think we'll be learning that later. The chancellor at the school actually told me yesterday that kind of information will only emerge in court.
There is a teenage neighbor who has known him his entire life, and he thinks that James Holmes was set up.
I'm pissed. That's it. I'm at. You know, I don't feel like he did it. You know, I felt like it was a scam or something, but, you know, it's just overwhelming.
Anthony Mai also tells me he has a hunch the suspect, James Holmes, was bullied.
I felt like, this is just a feeling in my guts, but I felt like he had something, like he was being picked on or something, but that's just my idea.
Diane, good evening to you from the crime scene that is James Holmes' former apartment. Tonight we're getting a much fuller picture of this young man and his astonishing metamorphosis.
In the program,
that video of James Holmes at a summer science camp 6 years ago betrays no hint of the mayhem to come.
In personal life, he enjoys playing soccer and strategy games, and his dream is to own a Slurpee machine.
You see a promising scientific mind and glimpses of humor.
So I also incorporated it into a game. What better game than rock, paper, scissors?
And it is this James Holmes, so far from the flame-haired, dead-eyed alleged mass murderer, that people we spoke to today remember. He grew up comfortably in San Diego, his mom a nurse, his father a manager at a software company. According to his fifth-grade teacher,
he was a top student. Everything that he did, he excelled in academically.
His high school friends say similar things.
I remember him as a very smart, humorous individual.
In the fall of 2006, Holmes enrolled at the University of California, Riverside, majoring in neuroscience, graduating with honors. In the fall of 2011, he enrolled at the University of Colorado, Denver for a PhD. And it was here, for reasons that remain unknown, that the trouble appears to have begun. 4 months ago, police say Holmes went on a shopping spree, buying guns, ammo, and explosives. On June 10th, Holmes sent an email to campus officials saying he was dropping out. No explanation.
It's very unusual for a student to withdraw from a program.
On July 19th, he bought a ticket to the midnight showing of Batman, and the next day, the rampage.
Holmes is an extremely intelligent person who had a lot of potential awaiting in his future. Both of his parents held prestigious jobs, which we will discuss further, but it seems odd that a student with such a bright future would just suddenly snap in the time span of just 4 months. In 2006, out of high school, Holmes worked as a researcher at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. This school is dedicated to studies in life sciences and specializes in diseases, neuroscience, and behavior. At such a young age, Holmes was involved in some cutting-edge research and was perhaps a person of interest to certain government agencies or corporations as a future scientific candidate. The Salk Institute was founded in 1960 by the developer of the polio vaccine, Jonas Salk. In 2010, he received his undergraduate degree in neuroscience with the highest of honors from the University of California, Riverside. He was also a member of the Golden Key Honor Society, in which Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton were also members of.
In covertly recorded off-air transmissions from the Bush-Clinton presidential election campaign in the 1990s, we can see that Bill Clinton was nothing more than a puppet to the puppet masters which placed him in the White House. Bill Clinton's demeanor seems to be similar to a person who is under a hypnotic trance.
I love you. Can we do any more? We'll do some more. We'll do some more. I'll do some more fun. Call. We done all call all today.
In 2011, for reasons unknown, he declined a higher grant offering and free tuition to the University of Illinois and chose to attend the University of Colorado Medical Campus. He received the grant of $21,600 from the National Institute of Health. Suddenly, his grades dropped and he began to lose focus on his studies. At the University of Colorado, Holmes was seeing a psychiatrist and apparently mailed a notebook depicting violence and the crime to the university. However, after Holmes' arrest, there was a report of a letter that was mailed which turned out not to be from Holmes, and upon the FBI searching the university's mailroom, suddenly then the notebook was found. Keep in mind, this was after his arrest. It would seem that the notebook was planted there to make it seem like Holmes is guilty and had severe psychological problems. The truth is, Holmes was studying some really intense subjects such as time travel, biological and psychological sciences, and likely several other areas of breakthrough sciences which would prove valuable for top secret or political agencies.
Over the course of the summer, I've been working with a temporal illusion.
Last month, he allegedly applied online for a membership to a local gun range. He allegedly said he did not use drugs, nor was he a convicted felon. ABC News has learned the gun range owner called the suspect several times to invite him to orientation. He says Holmes never called back, and that the recording on the suspect's phone was bizarre, freakish. Holmes is now in solitary confinement, and in a one-on-one interview, the police chief revealing to us the suspect's parents are remaining silent.
They are not talking to us right now. Maybe that will change, but right now they're not talking to us.
How tough is it going to be for this community to see the suspect in court?
I mean, he has harmed so many people. Not only the victims, but all their extended families, and I think it'll be very hard.
My mentor, John Jacobs.
The police chief telling me they are getting significant help from the FBI, behavioral analysts who are here in this community trying to look into his past.
If you make any statements, they can be used against you.
The Denver shooting suspect James Holmes, who's 24, appears in court for the first time.
Any plea you make must be voluntary, not the result of any undue influence or coercion. Typically, you have a right to be advised of the charges. You have a right to be advised of the charges. The duty judge has made a preliminary determination of probable cause to believe you're committed the offense of first-degree murder, which is a Class 1 felony under Colorado law. Ordinarily, individuals are entitled to bail. Given the nature of the charges, you are currently being held on a no-bond hold. You also have a right to have a jury trial and preliminary hearing to determine whether there's probable cause to believe that you're the person that committed the offense.
He reportedly keeps asking what's going on and claims to be suffering from amnesia with no memory whatsoever of the shooting. He's also belly aching about prison food and some days reportedly doesn't eat at all.
That is Bruce Wayne's grandfather, Mrs. Cooper?
His great-grandfather.
I understand he was tapped for skull and bones.
Tapped for it? Sir, he found his skull and bones.
City with a few drums of gas and a couple of bullets.
It's been decided that you will be dressed as a priest to help you get away in the pandemonium afterwards. Chun-Jin will give you a two-piece Soviet Army sniper's rifle that fits nicely into a special bag. There's a spotlight booth that won't be in use. It's up under the roof on the 8th Avenue side of the garden. We'll have absolutely clear, protected shooting. You are to shoot the presidential nominee through the head. And Johnny will rise gallantly to his feet and lift Ben Arthur's body in his arms, stand in front of the microphones and begin to speak. The speech is short, but it's the most rousing speech I've ever read. It's been worked on here and in Russia on and off for over 8 years. I shall force someone to take the body away from him. Then Johnny will lead those microphones and those cameras with blood all over him, fighting off anyone who tries to help him, defending America even if it means his own death, rallying a nation of television viewers into hysteria to sweep us up into the White House with powers that will make martial law seem like anarchy.
Welcome to Bogota.
Tú coges con un soplido así, por ejemplo, tú estás aquí caminando y de repente, o sea, tú vas de espalda o vamos a una pinta caminando acá y yo me le paso por un lado y le hago así nomás con eso, nomás con ese destello. El man ya queda burundangueado. Tú esperas, cuando ya tú ves el efecto, es que el man empieza como a medio tal, entonces ya tú eres dueño total del man. Entonces tú lo coges, lo encanas y tú te lo llevas para donde tú quieras, parece un niño. Y tú te llevas, llévame a tu casa, saca tu chequera, dame tus cuentas de ahorros, tu número de tu tarjeta y tal. Y así, si te pasas de dosis, corre peligro de que la persona se muera.
Normally conditioned American who's been trained to kill, then to have no memory of having killed. Without memory of his deed, he cannot possibly feel guilt. Nobody, of course, have any reason to fear being caught. And having been relieved of those uniquely American symptoms, guilt and fear, he cannot possibly give himself away.
I told them to build me an assassin. I wanted a killer from a world filled with killers, and they chose you.
It's a terrible thing to hate your mother. But I didn't always hate her.
The preceding is from Richard Condon's novel, The Manchurian Candidate, which in 1962 became a hit movie, in which Lawrence Harvey played Raymond Shaw, a highly decorated prisoner of war who was brainwashed by his North Korean captors to become a robot assassin programmed to murder the president. Unknown to millions of people who thrilled to this taut tale in theaters across America, the Central Intelligence Agency, at the time, through its MK-Ultra program, was devoting large resources to see if by drugs, electroshock, or hypnotism, a robot assassin could in fact be created. Common wisdom, of course, holds that a person cannot be programmed to do something that he would find morally objectionable. But not everyone believes that.
After receiving a small dose of LSD, they're confused and undisciplined.
The notion that you can't be hypnotized to do something you're not morally inclined to do was clearly disproved by our government.
Dr. Philip Melanson is the author of the recently released book, The Robert Kennedy Assassination, in which he investigates the hypnoprogramming aspects of the Kennedy murder. Dr. Melanson has spent over a decade looking through government mind control files.
The experts that they had doing this kind of research believed you could do that. They demonstrated how it could be done both in their own practices and in their work for the government. And millions of dollars was spent and hundreds of people were worked on and were made to do those things. And the successful uses of hypno-programmed persons as couriers and spies is admitted by the government. The government refuses to admit assassination, but clearly they had that technology available as well. And it can be done. The mainstream of the medical profession and the experts think it can't be done or choose to believe it can't be done, but the broad group working for the government believed it could be done and demonstrated that they could do it.
From the moment Sirhan was caught with the smoking gun to this day, as he serves a life sentence in a California prison, Sirhan claims to have no memory of killing Bobby Kennedy. In what appeared to be an open and shut case, Sirhan's lawyers never contested his guilt. They merely sought to prove him insane, incapable of planning the assassination. But the jury convicted Sirhan of first-degree premeditated murder. They concluded he was a politically motivated assassin, a lone gunman who was faking his amnesia to avoid punishment. But some experts investigating the assassination believe Sirhan's amnesia is genuine. They offer a highly controversial theory for the cause of Sirhan's lack of memory.
Sirhan's lack of memory for the murder of Robert Kennedy was genuine, and it was established by both the defense and the prosecution before the trial. Sirhan himself badly wanted to remember what had happened. After all, he was caught with a smoking gun, so he wanted very badly to remember, and he worked hard at it, but he was still unable to come up with any motive or any memory of the crime.
Sirhan remembers the events just prior to the shooting and just after his capture, but claims to have a lapse in memory during the actual shooting.
Do you remember drinking coffee?
I remember being around the coffee.
You don't remember anything at all after that? What do you remember when you got back and after you've had some coffee?
I was choking like a son of a bitch.
Choking?
I was choking.
Choking on what?
They grabbed they grabbed my throat.
Oh, you mean after the shooting?
Yeah.
I see.
Psychiatrists for both the defense and prosecution testified that Sirhan did have amnesia for the assassination. But to this day, no psychiatrist has found any evidence of psychosis in Sirhan, which scientists consider another possible cause of amnesia. Melanson became convinced that Sirhan's lack of memory is the result of being hypnotized and programmed to kill.
After 15 years of analyzing the evidence and interviewing experts and witnesses, the only logical conclusion in this case, from my mind, is that Sirhan was a programmed assassin, programmed to show up shooting at Robert Kennedy, and programmed not to remember.
Well, significant new claims about the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. Lawyers for the man convicted of killing the brother of President John F. Kennedy, who was himself a presidential candidate at the time, RFK was, coming forward with new forensic evidence that they say will prove their client's innocence after more than 4 decades. Trace Gallagher has the latest now. Trace?
Sirhan is now 67 years old, Megan. Remember that he admitted killing Kennedy with quoting 20 years of malice aforethought. He later recanted that confession, has appealed many times, and has always failed. Well, now his lawyers say they have significant new forensic evidence that will get this conviction set aside. Now remember, prosecutors all along have said that 8 shots were fired and 3 of them hit Kennedy. The lawyers now say they have used sophisticated audio equipment to go back and listen to the recordings of the assassination to show that 13 shots were fired from multiple guns and that Sirhan's pistol was only able to fire 8 bullets. And they now claim they have proof that the bullet that was taken from Robert Kennedy's neck did not match Sirhan's gun and that it was switched with another bullet before the trial. There's no explanation of how they plan to prove that. The lawyers say that a second gunman was there. They just don't know who the second gunman was. California's Attorney General is the one who's handling the appeal. There has been no comment at all from the California AG, so now Sirhan's lawyers are asking a judge for an evidentiary hearing in this case, Megan, and there's no response yet on that as well.
Wow.
The buildings behind me were the headquarters for the World War II Office of Strategic Services. It was here that the first halting steps toward mind control began. The shaper and molder of OSS was General Wild Bill Donovan. He said of his group's work, "We may have made mistakes, but we were not afraid to try things that were never done before." In this anything-goes atmosphere, Donovan appointed this man, Stanley Lovell, a Boston industrialist, to break new ground in many scientific and technical fields. Donovan called Lovell his Dr. Moriarty, after the fiendish professor in Sherlock Holmes. Lovell liked the name and posed for this Saturday Evening Post photo. He later wrote of his OSS job that it was, quote, to stimulate the Peck's bad boy beneath the surface of every American scientist and to say to him, throw all of your normal law-abiding concepts out of the window. Here's a chance to raise merry hell. It was in this atmosphere that the search for mind control began. This bizarre man would be an active participant in that search over the next 2 decades. His name is George White, an OSS captain who had formerly been with the Bureau of Narcotics. In his diary, seen here publicly for the first time, White left a legacy of the darker side of American intelligence work. He received his early OSS training at the British-run school at Oshawa, Canada, the same school where Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, was trained. White referred to the school in his diaries as the Oshawa School of Mayhem and Murder. Mike Burke, former OSS colleague of White's and now president of Madison Square Garden Center.
Very compelling fellow, mysterious fellow, almost mystical fellow. He was fascinating because you knew something about him, but not enough about him to really get a fix on him. He also knew a great deal about the swifter elements of society, the gamier side of life, and he was very impressive in his technical knowledge of the underworld, so to speak.
He said, when one of our men gets beat up, he says, you have to act real fast and teach these guys a lesson.
Charles Siragusa, a former narcotics officer and friend of White's.
He'll come around, he says, and break your kneecaps. And with that, one guy laughed, and George would always have little Billy with him. And this one guy sort of naked. George White turned around and whapped him across the neck with it. Then he picked up a pool stick and started beating everybody up.
He made his point.
And he made his point.
George White was not a man of understatement or subtleties. His boss at OSS, Stanley Lovell, referred to him as deadly and dedicated. In this note from White's diaries, it says, call Lovell regarding TD. TD was a rather transparent cover for Truth Drug. George White worked with the Truth Drug Committee here at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in the nation's capital. They experimented with mescaline, scopolamine, and marijuana on unwitting victims. The committee soon learned there was no easy panacea, no truth drug at this stage. But White and later colleagues would not stop trying. The goal remained the same. As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation.
Moscow is in the midst of the last hours of summer.
Brainwashing, hypnosis, and even surgical manipulation of the human brain has all been researched thoroughly by the CIA.
To provide an objective record of the subject's behavior, she's filmed before treatment and again after treatment, and the two films placed side by side. Notice how the subject before treatment, in the picture on the right, holds onto the chair as she moves. Notice the difference in posture, the greater effort required to rise from the chair, the longer time needed to complete the simple task.
He would cut the skin, take the skin flap back, roll it back. He would then literally remove the skull, the top part of the skull. The patient all this time is under a local anesthetic, completely conscious.
From my own point of view, the most unexpected finding was to discover that a mild electrical current applied to the surface of the brain causes a patient to have a memory from his own past sometimes.
Good. Make it 1 volt, please. 1 volt. Yeah. Is it 1 volt?
I heard what sounded like an orchestra playing, and I asked the nurse where it was coming from. And she said, "What music?" And I said, "Well, that music." And then it stopped.
Then I stimulated it again, you remember, and asked you about it, and you hummed it. Will you hum it now? You remember it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Da 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 da.
MKUltra was one program of a series of programs that came out of the CIA to experiment with different types of mind control, using drugs, using electroshock, using insulin shock, and other techniques.
I think that the goal for those people who planned the program was very straightforward. It was an attempt to figure out a way to interrogate people and to learn how to protect their own agents against control by others. If you put someone in a position of being disabled by not feeding them or not allowing them to sleep or overwhelming them with sound, if you use massive shock treatment and you give people massive doses of drugs such as PCP or mescaline or amphetamines or LSD, and if you put them in periods of darkness where they can't predict from one minute to another what is going to happen next, so they're always dreading, there's no consistency to sort of what's going to happen, anybody can be put in a position of being open to brainwashing. Ewan Cameron was probably the foremost psychiatrist of his time in the 1950s. He was using high-tech sound techniques. He was using multiple kinds of loop recorders to force people to listen to recorded messages 24 hours a day for weeks on end to basically destroy people's thinking patterns.
my lysergic acid into the vein, and he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Now there, lassie, we'll see you later." And I started to feel very frightened, and the fright became a terror. And I sort of began throwing myself from one side of the room to the other. I didn't know what to do to stop this feeling. It felt like my bones were melting, that I just didn't know who I was anymore.
This is not just break-ins of people's homes. It's not just invasions of privacy by illegal wiretapping. This is an invasion of a person's mind. And that is about as profound an injury, except for loss of life, that the government can impose.
This was a post-Nazi program, if you will. It was an Americanization.
I've often made the statement, and I still make it flippantly. The Nazis didn't lose the war. They just had to move.
Now it's 50 years later. Now they're much more clever, much more sophisticated. They have a lot more money to spend.
Manchurian candidate James Holmes has been formally charged with 24 counts of murder. A tragic mass killing that left 12 people dead and 58 people wounded still leaves many questions unanswered, as eyewitness reports continue to emphasize that there were two killers, 2 gas masks found, gas canisters thrown from multiple directions, an unexplainable blood splatter trail leading back to the movie theater, and an obviously drugged out James Holmes who couldn't even speak his own name at his first court appearance. As we first suggested in our breaking video the day of the shooting, James Holmes has been exhibiting classic signs of an MK Ultra subject who has been psychologically compromised in order to stage a politically motivated mass murder. Although shocking for many people to think about, we need to ask, what would be the motive for the federal government to stage such a massive cover-up and brutal killing spree? Further adding fuel to the fire, The Independent broke over the weekend that James Holmes, a former University of Colorado graduate student of an elite neuroscience program, had been under the psychological care and watch of a psychiatrist who was part of a campus threat assessment team. She was also a former employee of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs from 2008 to 2010. James Holmes is reminiscent of many Manchurian candidates of years past, including Sirhan Sirhan, who was convicted for the assassination of United States Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Just like Holmes, many believe Sirhan had been psychologically programmed and his mind wiped after the killing. To this day, Sirhan has no memory of the RFK assassination or aftermath. Other suspected MK Ultra subjects, such as Ted Kaczynski, have all been associated with secretive government programs. A considerable amount of circumstantial evidence suggests that Theodore Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, participated in CIA-sponsored MK Ultra experiments conducted at Harvard University from the fall of 1959 through the spring of 1962. Also, over the weekend, according to the Denver Post, Colorado's real-life shooting had imitated a training exercise at Parker Medical School the same day of the killing. According to the Post, the tragedy that played out in the Aurora movie theater was ironically paralleled as a classroom learning experience in a medical school in Parker the same day as the real one.
While the morning of this tragedy is public, the investigation into it is getting more secretive. A local judge has amended a gag order preventing authorities from releasing information on James Holmes, the 24-year-old suspect arrested in connection with the mass shooting. It now also applies to the place he studied, the University of Colorado, Denver. This comes after reports that Holmes sent a package containing a notebook with threatening messages to a professor at the school. On Monday, when he first appeared in court, the university received a suspicious package, but it would not confirm the contents nor its sender.
That huge development in the Colorado movie theater shooting. Word now that suspect James Holmes may have mailed a notebook detailing his deadly plot to the University of Colorado. GMA weekend anchor Dan Harris has been following every development of this story. Joins us now from Aurora this morning. And good morning to you, Dan.
Josh, good morning to you. The investigation into the lethal plot allegedly hatched in the apartment building right behind me is heating up this morning with that disturbing new discovery. Overnight, while the windows at the apartment of suspect James Holmes were fixed up and people were allowed back into a place formerly rigged with booby traps, behind the scenes, investigators were busy analyzing a notebook believed to be written by Holmes, which ABC News has learned was mailed to the University of Colorado, where Holmes had been a student until dropping out last month. Fox News is reporting the spiral notebook was mailed to a psychiatrist at the university and that it contains, quote, full details about how he was going to kill people, drawings of what he was going to do in it, drawings and illustrations of the massacre.
They're going to start going through it, looking for pre-planning, motivation, purchase of weapons.
One of the sources who spoke to Fox indicated the package arrived on campus on July 12th, more than a week before the massacre, but wasn't found until this past Monday during a search of the mailroom, raising questions about whether the massacre could have been avoided. Campus officials call that report inaccurate and say the package was delivered by the post office on the same day that it was found. Those officials are refusing to say whether Holmes was seeing a psychiatrist, although they insist they handled his case correctly all along.
To the best of our knowledge at this point, we did everything that we think we should have done.
Due to all of the evidence discussed, and the fact that Holmes was apparently not actually seen in the theater before or after the shooting, it is to my belief that someone else was in the theater doing the shooting, while Holmes waited outside in a trance or drug-induced state, waiting for police to arrive. The reason why Holmes began acting so strange just a few months before the attack is likely because this is when he began playing the role of the patsy, as evidence against him began being put into place to ensure that when the crime was committed, he could be painted as a killer by the media very easily, and all the details could simply fall into place. Details like his gun registration, weapons purchases, the booby-trapped apartment were all likely done prior by the CIA or the FBI. The notebook was put into play after his arrest, as he continues to be set up as the lone gunman guilty of the crime. The second person of interest, with the goatee, that was seen opening the emergency exit to the theater was likely his handler, who allowed the real shooter inside to commit the murders. Prior to the attack, Holmes was also apparently obsessed with a movie trailer he saw called Suffocator of Sins, in where a character similar to Batman is killed, but his role assumed by the person who finds him. This could also be reported as a ploy to make it seem more believable that he actually committed the crime, or as a publicity stunt by producer Diggity Dave.
Batman spin-off director questioned by James Holmes before shooting. Hi, I'm Stephanie Bauer for Holly Scoop. A Batman spin-off director, Diggity Dave, a former MTV star, claims the alleged shooter in the Aurora, Colorado movie theater massacre called him 2 times a month prior to the tragedy. According to the Batman director, the conversations happened in June and had to do with the specific details of his upcoming spin-off film called The Suffocator of Sins. The director tells KNX's 1070's Charles Feldman he kept pressing if I could give him more information on the story. He wanted to know how many people Batman kills. He wanted to know if it was selective killing. Does he make a list of people he wants to kill, or is it a mass body count?
James Holmes calls MTV star. Yeah, I go, what's your name, man? And he said, my name is James Holmes. Pimp My Ride's Diggity Dave claiming the suspected Colorado gunman called him twice, 1 month prior to the theater shooting, to discuss Dave's upcoming film, The Suffocator of Sins, a movie described as a sick and dark twist to the Batman movies. The part where he opens fire, that Batman-type figure, he wanted to know how many people, does Batman kill. Though he can't prove it, Dave tells KNX 1070 in Los Angeles, Holmes phoned him and that he was obsessed with violence. And he was just like, man, that's the one thing that I'm disappointed. Like, it should have been a bigger gun.
Now, there are those who are wondering why come forward now, and maybe it's because the movie is set to premiere this Friday.
So then, why would the government want to set James Holmes up? What could be the end goal that they were hoping to accomplish? What would be the point of brainwashing a bright university student to commit the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States? And why has there been an increase in shootings after the events of July 20th? It's time to take a look into the possible motives of the crime. Although at the time of this video being made, the trial and investigation into the happenings of July 20th are still undergoing, it is important that independent research into the event continues as new details slowly come to light. We have shown that the media and news reports continue to announce that Holmes acted alone, and the official story remains that there were no other parties involved in the massacre. Although there is little evidence proving that James was even in the theater before, during, or after the crimes, major media are still reporting that he is guilty before the trial has even taken place. Due to the patient-doctor confidentiality agreement, we may also never learn what was discussed between James Holmes and his campus psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton. Also, because of the gag order put into place by the judge, it would seem the government does not want anyone to know about what Holmes was studying at the University of Colorado. It would seem that he was involved in some breakthrough materials, and it is possible that he was on the verge of something that could affect national security. It is not uncommon for the government to work with scientists covertly, on experiments that are highly sensitive, like in the case of Nazi scientists that were brought to America under the CIA project called Paperclip. It is also possible that Holmes was involved in a governmental program involving psychological topics, and became a guinea pig or test subject for another purpose set forth by the government. Due to the materials Holmes was studying, it would make sense that he was already enrolled in the studies and would play the perfect role. This could also explain why Holmes became so distant from his friends and family prior to the attack. Although this is worth consideration, there are other possible motives in this case which seem to have a lot more credibility. Another obvious factor in the motive of the Colorado shooting is the debate on gun control. The crime took place just 1 week prior to a hearing that would decide if small arms and guns would be banned. The treaty was never signed, however, but other shootings have also taken place since then, and the topic has been discussed widely amongst the government. If it becomes a United Nations issue, however, it can threaten anyone in the world's right to bear arms, and would disarm the world, making people defenseless against attacks, and would outlaw hunting as well. The ATF, a government agency, were responsible for top-secret programs like Project Gunrunner and Operation Fast and Furious. In Operation Fast and Furious, ATF agents were responsible for selling guns to contacts so that they could trace them to higher-profiled criminals, mainly members of Mexican cartels, so they could make more important arrests. Obviously, many of the near 2,000 guns were used in murders and violent crimes, including the murder of a border patrol officer.
The Mexican government complains that they were not informed about the Fast and Furious operation. Did you authorize this operation, and was President Calderon properly informed about it?
Well, first of all, I did not authorize it. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, did not authorize it. He's been very clear that our policy is to catch gun runners and put them into jail. So what he's done is he's assigned an IG, an Inspector General, to investigate what exactly happened here.
Who authorized it?
Well, we don't have all the facts. That's why the IG is in business to collect the facts.
You were not even informed about it?
Absolutely not. This is a pretty big government, you know, the United States government. I've got a lot of moving parts.
John Dodson, a federal agent, says what he was asked to do was beyond belief.
You were intentionally letting guns go to Mexico.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the agency was.
An alcohol, tobacco, and firearms senior agent assigned to this Phoenix office since 2010, Dodson's job is to stop gun trafficking across the border. Instead, he says he was ordered to sit by and watch it happen. Investigators call the tactic letting guns walk, in this case, into the hands of criminals who would use them in Mexico and the U.S. Dodson's bosses say that never happened. Now he's risking his job to go public.
I'm boots on the ground here in Phoenix and telling you we've been doing it every day since I've been here. Here I am. Tell me I didn't do the things that I did. Tell me you didn't order me to do the things that I did. Tell me it didn't happen. Now you have a name on it, you have a face to put with it. Here I am. Someone now. Tell me it didn't happen.
Agent Dodson and other insiders say the gun-walking strategy was approved all the way to the Justice Department. The idea was to see where the guns ended up, build a big case, and take down a major cartel. And it was all kept secret from Mexico. ATF named the case Fast and Furious. This surveillance video obtained by CBS News shows suspected drug cartel suppliers carrying boxes of weapons to their cars at a Phoenix gun shop. Those long boxes being loaded into the red car are AK-47 type assault rifles.
He's armed again, carrying another appears to be 5 boxes, hard case, everything that would hold a pistol.
So it turns out ATF not only allowed the guns to walk, they videotaped it. Documents show the inevitable result. The guns ATF let go began showing up at crime scenes in Mexico. And as ATF stood by, watching thousands of weapons hit the street, the Fast and Furious Group supervisor noted the escalating Mexican violence. 958 killed in March 2010, the most violent month since 2005. The same email notes, our subjects purchased 359 firearms during March alone, including numerous Barrett 50 caliber rifles.
Did you feel that ATF was partly perhaps to blame for the escalating violence in Mexico and on the border?
Yes, ma'am. I even asked them if they could see the correlation between the two. The more that our guys buy, the more violence that we're having down there.
Senior agents, including Dodson, told us they confronted their supervisors over and over.
And what was the answer? What did they say?
If you're going to make an omelet, you got to scramble some eggs.
Was it the goal to knowingly and intentionally allow these guns to go into Mexico?
Was that the ultimate goal? Not as explained to me. Was that the rules in play to achieve what the goal that they had explained? Yes. We were mandated, let these guns go. Make no mistake, there was not a time we were out there on surveillance where we didn't have the forethought that these were going to be recovered in crimes. The next time we became aware of these guns would be when they were recovered at their final crime. Not whatever crime they might have done. It was the last crime that they commit, not they commit, but the person who has them commit, that they're recovered in. There may be 9 or 10 that the cartels have perpetrated with those firearms prior to that date, but that recovery date is when we'll learn about it.
All right, well, there are new accusations against the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Critics say that the federal agency is now retaliating by firing the agent who blew the whistle on the mission that allowed thousands of guns to get into the hands of Mexican drug lords. That's known as Fast and Furious. Some of those weapons, 2 of them, in fact, were found at the scene when Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was gunned down in December of last year. Now, the ATF whistleblower, Vince Cefalu, joins me now. Also joining us right now is Congressman Darrell Issa. He is the chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, who's led these hearings into this investigation of Operation Fast and Furious. Vince, it is good to have you with us this morning. Welcome.
Martha, thank you for having me on. More importantly, thank you for keeping the spotlight on.
Absolutely. So what happened? How did you get the word after 24 years of service at ATF that you were basically, your badge was being taken away and your gun was taken away as well, correct?
That's correct. And I was invited in by my second line supervisor with 2 other witnesses and apprised of that without any warning. When I challenged it to them, they said that they were doing just what the attorneys had told them to do, which is the standard protocol anymore for decisions within this bureau.
And what did they say was the reason that they were taking away your badge after 24 years and many years of exemplary reports of your work at ATF?
The basic underpinning was lack of candor, which is totally fabricated, and several other allegations regarding conduct that apparently occurred 4 or 5 years ago. I'm really not clear on all that. The attorneys are reviewing it now.
Let's take a look at the ATF statement that they produced to FoxNews.com when they were asked that question about why you were being let go. It says ATF will not comment on specific ongoing personnel matters, and it is legal to use disciplinary actions to retaliate against employees, and ATF does not engage in such improper reprisals. But you, in fact, are the person who brought attention to the Fast and Furious program and to the fact that weapons were basically being put in the hands of people who gave them to cartels, and that 2 of those guns, in fact, were found at the scene of ATF border agent at his death, Brian Terry, correct?
That is correct. I was instrumental in fact, formulating the idea to stand up a website to expose the across-the-board mismanagement in ATF.
And what made you do that, Vince? What made you do that? What prompted that?
Outcries from hundreds of agents across the country when my original dispute started, and I realized that there was no mechanism in the government, any mechanisms that there were to communicate with senior management and report abuses were broken, and the leadership continually disregarded our reports, our allegations, no matter how well we substantiate them with documentation. They're well documented, by the way.
And, you know, as you know, the President and Eric Holder have basically said that they had no knowledge of this Fast and Furious program. We're still trying to figure out who authorized this program because, as you say, yourself and many, many agents on the ground thought that this was a crazy way to go about this and that it would put guns in the hands of the wrong people. You know, do you feel vindicated in the information that you put out there through your website?
I feel instrumental in doing my job. That's all I ever wanted to do. We don't cheat to win. We play by the rules. And when our leadership chose to not play by the rules, people stepped forward. Agent Dodson, Agent Gill, all the people who have come out front and put themselves in a position. So the agency had to identify the poster boy. Watch what happens to Vince Sheffield before you consider stepping forward.
I'm David Ortiz. In the hours, days, and weeks ahead, we can expect a concerted attack on the right to own firearms and the Second Amendment in response to the shooting in Colorado last night. Proponents of disarming the public will argue that restricting the right to own firearms will prevent mass murders and violence. But here's something they will not tell you. The chance you will be a victim of a mass shooting is at best minuscule. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the proportion of homicide incidents involving 2 victims has increased slightly from 2.7% in 1980 to 3.7% in 2008. So basically within about a 30-year window, that number has barely increased. Here are some more numbers. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 3.7% of all homicides involved 2 victims, 0.5% involved 3 victims, 0.2% involved 4 victims, and 0.1% involved 5 or more victims. So obviously mass murders are rarely happening, yet they continue to want to gun grab the government. Moreover, the homicide rate in the United States has declined sharply in recent years from 9.3 homicides per 100,000 in 1992 to 4.8 homicides per 100,000 in 2010. So this is obviously far from an epidemic, yet the government wants control of your guns. And here's one of the reasons why. I'm going to give you some quick stories. A 71-year-old recently was at a gaming cafe in Florida. 2 intruders came in, one with a bat, one with a gun. They wanted to rob the place. He shot a gun, and the perpetrators ran away. And as a result, one bystander says, I think he is wonderful for doing what he did, for protecting us. And that could actually be seen on YouTube from what I'm told. Another example of law-abiding citizens protecting themselves with a gun. In Phoenix recently, a 14-year-old boy protected his 3 younger brothers from an intruder who broke into their home with a gun. He shot at the intruder with his father's gun, and he struck the intruder, and the intruder ran away. That recently happened in Phoenix. And just another story that recently happened in Oklahoma City. A woman was able to protect both herself and her child. An intruder came in, tried to kick in her door. He came at her with a knife, and her name, Mrs. McKinley, she took out her 12 gauge and she shot the perpetrator and was able to save the life of both her child and herself. But the government would say that's evil. It's, you know, she was wrong, obviously. So those are just some great examples, and you don't see that in the media. Examples of people protecting their loved ones because they used a firearm. Let me end with this. It's a quote from Ben Franklin, and it said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety."
Let's get started right into the saga that is James Holmes, the so-called Batman massacre. I guess he's just the crazy nut now, but now we've learned that he has DARPA connections in his past. So let's just go over these real quick. In fact, they go all the way back to his grandfather. James Holmes was one of 6 recipients of the National Institutes of Health Neuroscience Training Grant at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Denver. That was found by Wayne Matson. The medical campus is recently decommissioned site for the U.S. Army's Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center and is named after Philip Anschutz, the billionaire Christian fundamentalist oil and railroad tycoon. Furthermore, Holmes also worked as a research assistant intern at the Salk Institute of the University of California at San Diego. Now, he did this in high school. And the Salk Institute teamed up with DARPA, Columbia University, the University of California at San Francisco, and the University of Wisconsin, Wake Forest, and the candy bar company Mars to prevent fatigue and combat troops through enhanced use of a blood-flowing, dilating antioxidant flavanol found in cocoa. So they made this magic chocolate that would keep troops going all the time. And so there's your first DARPA connection. The second one, in addition, James's father, Dr. Robert Holmes, worked for the San Diego-based HNC Software Incorporated, a company that worked with DARPA to develop chronic neural networks that enable machines to translate oral and visual stimuli and stimulate human thinking. But it doesn't stop there. The Holmes family appears to have deep connections to the military-industrial complex. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Holmes, grandfather of James Holmes, was a Turkish language graduate of the Army Language School, and later the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, the same installation incidentally where alleged 9/11 hijacker Saeed Al-Admi supposedly trained. So you got all these deep DARPA connections with James Holmes. You see him in court. His eyes are bugging out of his skull. He looks totally detached from reality. Nobody seems to be questioning that, at least in the mainstream media. Everybody else is wondering, what's this guy on? But, of course, there's nothing there.
Most important to note about James Holmes, the shooter, however, this report says, is that his father, Robert Holmes, was said to have been scheduled to testify within the next few weeks before a U.S. Senate panel on the largest bank fraud scandal in world history that is currently unfolding and threatens to destabilize and destroy the Western banking system. And stop right there. For those of you who don't know what LIBOR is or what's going on with the quote-unquote Illuminati banksters, big banksters, getting taken down by this European and international criminal court case that literally could put them in jail. But you have to go look that up. I don't have time to explain that to you now. Just understand that that's going on, and that's what this is regarding. Now back to the story. Robert Holmes, whose blue blood family links go back to the Mayflower, is known throughout the global banking community as being the creator of one of the most sophisticated computer algorithms ever developed, and is credited with developing predictive models for financial services, credit and fraud risk models, first and third-party application fraud models, and internet online banking fraud models. Educated at the University of California, Berkeley, Stanford University, Robert Holmes is currently the senior lead scientist with the American credit score company, FICO, which was formerly known as Farrer, Isaac & Company, and which every American citizen is beholden to should they need to borrow money. It's your credit score. Okay? So there you go. That's his father. Now, he's deeply connected in the science community, and they're trying to tell us he's just an average guy. Well, apparently not. Okay, he's not just an average guy. Average guy doesn't have this for parents.
Matt, you have said, as the headline I just quoted said, we should be outraged, screaming, going nuts over this. This is the mega scandal of mega scandals. Why, and why are you so outraged?
Well, I mean, LIBOR is like the sun at the center of the financial universe. I mean, if they're monkeying around with LIBOR, I talked to one friend who works on Wall Street. He said this is like finding out that the whole world is built on quicksand, because LIBOR is in everything. It's in mortgages, it's in credit cards, it's in all kinds of investments that are tied up with municipalities and communities. So if they play with this rate, it affects everything in the world, basically. And this goes far beyond any corruption scandal we've had.
Give us a quick overview. What is it they did? I mean, explain it to folks for whom LIBOR is like a foreign language. We know the prime rate. Maybe we know, we see a credit card rate on the statement we get. What's LIBOR? Who is it? Who sets it? And what have they been doing to do this?
LIBOR is basically, it's the rate at which banks charge each other to lend to each other. So it's essentially every morning a committee calls up each of the 16 banks in this committee, and they ask them how much they've been charging each other to borrow. And they report a number, and what they've been doing is lying about how much they've been charging. They've been giving lower numbers, or sometimes higher. Actually, they've been tweaking it in both directions. But essentially, they've been faking their credit scores. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay. Now, I'm going to come back to the mechanics of this in a minute, because it's important in terms of how many other people almost necessarily were involved. This can't be one bank doing it because of the way they do it. The import of this is, as you just said, every interest rate in the world comes back to LIBOR. You futz around with LIBOR, you're affecting hundreds of trillions of dollars every day. Dennis, Matt is, I jump out of my skin and people know when I'm upset. For Matt, this is exuberant. Dennis, do you share the sense of outrage that if they're doing this, this is corruption based on corruption based on corruption?
If anything, it's an understatement, Elliot.
I'm not prone to understatement, so explain to me why that is.
But, nobody should be surprised that we have yet another corruption scandal being done by one of these global too-big-to-fail banks. This is their business model. They are based on and have been based on for a long time of making as much money as quickly as possible in any way that they cannot get caught. When they were deregulated in the early 2000s, it wasn't just that the regulators walked off the beat. They were given the green light that there were basically no rules that applied to them, and they could do whatever they want. And took them about 7 years, and they caused the biggest financial crisis since the crash of 1929 and gave us the worst economy since the Great Depression. The same people who did that, the same executives with the same business model that crashed the entire financial system in 2008 are still running these banks. Diamond didn't just get to Barclays. He was there throughout the run-up and the good times through the scandal. And we're facing this scandal now, and there's going to be more to the extent that anybody keeps looking, because the entire business model is corrupt and rotten to its core.
Robert Holmes is a very important and connected person in the scientific community, as well as the world's financial community. He is the creator of an algorithm software that can essentially determine the sources of money, where it went, where it came from, and other details which can link to sources. This is a threat to the world elite banking structures and plays an important role in the LIBOR scandal, which threatens Wall Street and affects the common person. He was set to testify, and this could threaten banksters all over the world. Ironically, in the latest Batman movie, The Dark Knight Rises, the plot unfolds, depicting the rich class of Gotham City facing a threat that is Bane, the criminal leader who rises up and leads a group to literally attack Wall Street. The city of Gotham learns that the rich and elite have betrayed them, and Bane uses algorithm software to track the funds to Bruce Wayne. This story is strangely similar to the threat that Robert Holmes poses to Wall Street as well.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early
You are as precious to me as you were to your own mother and father. I swore to them that I would protect you, and I haven't.
The mayor's gonna dump him in the spring. Really?
Mm-hmm. But he's a hero.
A war hero. This is peacetime.
You think this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. You and your friends better batten down the hatches. 'Cause when it hits, you're all gonna never thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
What does that mean?
Rise.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that.
Allow me to introduce our American visitors. I must ask you to forgive their somewhat lackadaisical manners, but I have conditioned them, or brainwashed them, which I understand is the new American word. I am sure you've all heard the old wives' tale that no hypnotized subject may be forced to do that which is repellent to his moral nature, whatever that may be. Nonsense, of course.
So I wanted to finish the thought here. After one break, we have to hit live. Been around the world, but hard to believe we're being watched in 151 countries. Crazy. That journey changed the world. I'm a big fan of it. Who would save you again? And I don't know. Only twice. He's ready. What's the game? Once you got nothing much to gain. I can't have the electric. Think about it. No dope. That's for sure. Great guy to work for.
And to get to the point, has the man ever kicked anyone? Or has enough?
I apologize, my dear Dmitri. I keep forgetting that you're a young country and your attention span is limited. Tell me, Raymond, have you ever killed anyone?
No, ma'am.
Not even in combat?
In combat? Yes, ma'am, I think so.
Of course you have, Raymond. Raymond has been a crack shot since childhood.
Marvelous outlet for his aggressions. May I have the bayonet, please?
Not with the knife, with the hands.
Now then, Raymond, take this scarf and strangle Ed Mavoli to death.
All right.
Hey, Sarge, cut it up. Quiet, Ed, please. Now you just sit there quiet and cooperate. Yes, ma'am.
What in the world were they looking for with the magic mushrooms?
I think the best answer to that is that they were looking for fundamental information on compounds that would be capable of causing changes in behavior, changes in mental attitude.
Did you ever consider what would have happened if any of these substances were given to, say, unwitting people?
Oh, I don't remember having considered that specifically.
What if you... I trust perhaps you've thought about it.
Well, I haven't worried about it. Your question again, what would I have thought had I known that
any of these substances would
have been given to
unwitting persons?
You mean a hostile agent of another government?
No,
I think that was probably one of the things they had in mind.
I mean testing it out on an American citizen.
I guess I must seem very, very cold-blooded about this, but I don't recall ever having been very much preoccupied with that issue.
We are not professing to tell you the complete story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. Right. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.